The president will head to the House chamber to give his State of the Union address. It was supposed to happen last week, of course, but was pushed back because of the government shutdown.
Tonight, the president will give his agenda. White House aides say the address will have a theme of unity. Former candidate for Georgia's governor, Stacey Abrams, will give the Democrats rebuttal. So now we're joined by Democratic strategist Antjuan Seawright and CBS News contributor and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez. So we're going to break it down. I'm going to start with you, Leslie.
Sure.
So what we're hearing is that there's going to be a theme of unity. I think a lot of people were sort of wondering what the president would have done if the State of the Union speech happened when it was scheduled in the middle of a government shutdown. So now he has an opportunity to sort of reset a bit.
Absolutely. And so most presidents look at this, or at least the White House does, as an opportunity to get that little bump in terms of unity for a specific cause. It's normally their big agenda items that they're going to push forward, whether it's juvenile justice reform or a variety of different things. We know we'll hear about border security. We know we'll hear about infrastructure. But it's really, he's going to be making, I do believe, that national security case. That has not gone, and I think we should expect that. But he is going to try to, sorry, I'm just, can't even say that with the president.
When you say a national security case, do you think he'll reinforce his desire for those billions of dollars for the wall?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. He's going to make the case of why the country is still in jeopardy. I don't think he's going to say there's going to be a national emergency today, but he's definitely going to allude to it and build that commonality. This is his platform to do it, and with a teleprompter, you know, in such a prestigious occasion, it's definitely has a lot of positives for the president if he remains scripted.
So, Antjuan, the president doesn't seem to have a lot of bipartisan support. He has no Democrat support to declare a national emergency. There are some Republicans that are sort of coming out and saying that they're not in support of that as well. They're not in support of his policy when it comes to the Middle East. So this unity theme is not just to bring Democrats to his point of view. It's also to bring some Republicans over to his side.
Well, I think the president is in a tight spot or a tight jam. Number one, this is the first time of him being in Nancy Pelosi's house.
Right.
This is the first time he will address a split Congress with Democratic House, Republican Senate. And this is the first time I think that he will be really tested to try to put forth a legislative agenda that his base can get around and that he has to convince Democrats to get on board too. But here's the thing about this proposed speech of unity. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, we're open to hearing what you have to say. But I'm convinced I'm more about what you do than versus what you say. We've heard these screams and calls of unity before from this president, and then he goes back into his partisan corner, even abandoning some from his own party. And so I'll be curious to see what happens after tonight. As a Democrat, what I'm most concerned about is the fact that Bernie Sanders, the independent senator from Vermont, will then give a second response to the State of the Union after an historic proposed address by Stacey Abrams, African-American female. It's so frustrating. At the end of the day, you know, I've said this on this program before, and I'll say it again. Nobody wins when the family feuds, quoting Jay-Z. And so it's frustrating for us as Democrats that for the first time an African-American female, who are the heart and soul and the face of our party, will give the State of the Union address. And here's the independent senator from Vermont wants to give a second address. And it's so frustrating. I think we have to be unified as Democrats tonight more than ever.
So let's talk about Stacey Abrams, because I think a lot of people will be wondering, why is she the one giving the official rebuttal? She lost her race, her gubernatorial race.
Well, Fantasia says it like this: sometimes you have to lose to win again. And what I believe Stacey Abrams represents the Browning of America. She represents the face of this Democratic Party. And I think she represents where we have to go as a party, and that is making sure that African-American voters are front and center, particularly black women, who are the what I call the lion's share of our party. And I think Schumer, Pelosi, and many people in our party realize that. That's why they put her up. I think she represents so many things that a lot of us know where we need to be. I also think this is a perhaps flirt with what her next step may be in terms of a U.S. Senate possible race.
You know, but what's interesting is who was not asked. I mean, there's a lot. Look at the entire new Congress is a lot of women, women of color, a lot of new voices from non-traditional states.
I find that interesting too, Leslie.
There's so many of them. Now, you could make the argument that they're so progressive and they have such massive, you know, kind of energy around their own social media followings. They don't want to draw attention to these free radicals. And they want somebody who's a little more controlled, measured, maybe a little more mature, running on a statewide level. But why wouldn't you pick a Beto O'Rourke? Why wouldn't you know?
does. It's an interesting point because they already are sucking up a lot of the oxygen out of the room from some of these older school Democrats.
Arizona.
And
Right.
and there is a sense, I'm sure, Antjuan, that some of those, let's just call them I don't want to use the word older, but I just mean a different generation of Democrat is looking at these younger Democrats, these women of color that come from different faiths, and sort of saying to themselves, stay in your lane. We'll get you up there when it's time, and we're going to go with somebody who's more establishment.
Well, when you look at Stacey Abrams' resume, not only is she an African-American female, former Speaker of the House, Yale graduate, her resume speaks for itself. And somehow or another, we have to convince the younger and the more seasoned politicians in Washington, D.C.
I know, you said it right. That's classy.
That the world doesn't stop and go to the tune of Washington, D.C. Most people, everyday people, their lives are more, I think, connected to the Stacey Abrams of the world versus the Washington, D.C. bubble. I call Washington, D.C. dysfunctional city. And I think that is part of the thinking, like, you know what, let's think about the boys and girls, the people at home versus thinking about those in the political bubble.
Yeah. Leslie, we talked about this theme of unity, but, in many ways, sometimes the State of the Union is sort of a bit of a pantomime. Everyone claps when they're supposed to and sort of looks disapprovingly when they're supposed to. Is this the sort of speech, because this is a president that's facing some very, very low approval ratings, is this the sort of speech that could have an impact on his approval ratings in terms of the public? Can this shift the way people feel about him?
It tends to do that historically by very small percent. You're talking about 5%, and then it dissipates. So, that, yes, there will be the reality of that. In a couple of days, we'll see that there probably was a positive bump. But you touched on a really important point. There is a decorum, a sense of respect that you have in the Hall of Congress, that you have in Congress. But there is not a lot of respect between the right and the left right now, as there, even just the examples of Pelosi and Schumer going to the White House. It's bristly relationship. So there'll be a lot of thumbs down. The question is, will you see these people booing?
And a lot of Democrats didn't show up the last time.
Right. I think that the question is that sign of disrespect hurts both sides. We've certainly seen it. It gets mud on everybody's boots when the president does that, when they play small. So the question is, will a Democratic Congress, maybe most importantly the Democratic House, kind of be that respectful that the presidency deserves? I think under Pelosi you get that, but you have a lot of young members who, again, have their own agendas, and this is going to be their first State of the Union, so I want to watch how they respond.
Indeed. Antjuan Seawright, Leslie Sanchez, as always, great to talk to you. We'll talk to you in our 9 a.m. hour as well. Our special coverage of the President's State of the Union address begins tonight at 5 p.m. Eastern with Red and Blue. It will continue until the President's address at 9 p.m. Eastern. Watch it all right here on CBSN.